Hello everyone, my name is Henry Fenn, and I'm here today to present my research that I found on how can frustration resulting from video games be reduced. Before I get into this, I just wanted to say my own personal connection to this and why I stuck with this topic for so long, is that I personally struggle with this issue a lot. I see video games as sort of a hobby or leisurely activity people should be able to do after a long day of school or work just to relax and decompress. But because I get frustrated at them so often, it really just ruins the whole point of them, and I wanted to get back to enjoying them because I love playing them so much. This is not an issue that I myself am the only one who is experiencing. Seen in a lot of online forums, whether it be online game forums or even Reddit, there are other users who have this issue. This user in particular talks about how they just broke another one of their controllers after getting frustrated at a game of Madden. There's also a lot of online videos I'm sure you've seen of people destroying keyboards, mice, and even their monitors sometimes over being so frustrated at the games. So not only is this a widespread problem, but it's also one that's causing a lot of property damage. Because it is such a widespread problem, there have been some people who have tried to provide solutions to it. For instance, a lot of game journalists, such as this one, the one who says finding new outlets is a suggestion that they provided. This comes from a SteelSeries article. SteelSeries is a company that makes game gear. And so they provide some suggestions in game journalist articles that have titles such as top 6 ways to reduce frustration from playing video games or something along those lines. This one's suggestion was to find new outlets. Also, community members, friends of people, have tried to give them feedback. These two have given feedback saying that they just stopped playing the game when they started to get frustrated, or that they just started playing a different game genre and trying different games. Now, the problem that all of these share in common is that they all suck. They're not very good. The problem with them is that not only is there no data to back up any of their claims that they're making that are effective, but also they're just telling the person to just stop doing the thing that they enjoy in the first place. So, with all this, my last bit of background research I wanted to show was a study that I found from Soon and others, who had 67 participants in their study. And essentially, their study was able to conclude that there is a link between frustration and video games. So that's just establishing that there is a link. It's not just something that some people are feeling that they experience. There is research to back it. So all of this has led to my research question, or the gap in the research that I found, which is, what method is most effective at reducing frustration from video games? Because all these sources are providing methods to reduce frustration, but none of them are saying what is more effective for some people over others, and there's no data to really back up which one of them is most effective, or if any of them are effective at all. So I had 3 goals during my research. The first was to identify an effective method that would be used for reducing frustration. The second was to establish patterns between my participants' responses. And the third was to just find common trends in the data overall. I had 2 initial hypotheses. The first was that some participants were likely going to be more affected by some of the methods than others, just in the sense that some people are naturally more frustrated at things than others, so people may have just higher frustration levels than others while conducting these methods. And the second was that scheduled breaks I thought were going to be the best for reducing frustration, because having a set time where you just detach yourself from the computer and you get to decompose from the game, to decompress from the game that you were playing, would really help to regulate people's frustration while playing the games. So the method I decided to use during my research was the case study. I chose this for 3 primary reasons. The first was my limited participant size, because I only had 3 participants. The second was because I wanted to go very in-depth with each of my participants so that I could analyze their especially open-ended answers to some of my interview questions more thoroughly. And the final was ease of organization, because I was letting my participants respond more open-endedly to some of my questions, it'd be easier to organize my data with fewer participants. Some other aspects of my research: all of the participants that I had were adolescents, so ages 13 to 17. I did this because it was convenient for me, but also because this is the primary demographic that plays video games in the first place, so I thought it was the most appropriate for conducting my research. Participants were interviewed bi-weekly at the end of each week, or by their best convenience. Interviews were conducted via Discord using video and audio recordings, and parent consent with all of the information that I have of my research was sent out to each one of their parents, and I had them sign it as well as the participant themselves. The questions I asked were 3 quantitative and 3 qualitative, just to get a variety of data. Final bit of my research, the game I chose to do this with was Overwatch 2. I did this for a couple of reasons. The first was all my participants played this, and I knew this, so it'd be something that they'd be playing a lot, and so I'd be able to collect a lot of data from that. Overwatch 2 is also a buy-round game, so it's similar to how basketball, there's games of basketball, you can play one and then play another. In this, there are rounds of Overwatch, so you can play multiple rounds of it. So it'd be more consistent and introduce less differing data points in terms of the data that I collect, compared to a single-player game that some aspects of the story may be more fun than others. So there might be high points in the game and low points. It just keeps it more consistent. However, I did eventually run into a problem, and that was a new game came out. That game was Marvel Rivals. Everyone started playing this game instead of Overwatch 2 because they're both in the same genre, that being hero shooter. And so eventually I just decided, because they're in the same genre and they're very similar already, to just let participants pick and choose which game they wanted to play and when. I sent out another parent consent form to let parents know that their child would be playing Marvel Rivals during the research process. There are a couple of ethical considerations with my research that I addressed. The first was my safety. We wanted to make sure that I wasn't talking to 30-year-old random people online, and I was actually talking to adolescents. That's why I did not only audio but video recording, and I also made sure that the parents knew about that. Speaking of the parents, just parental consent in general, that's what the form was for. I made sure that the parents of the adolescents that I was conducting my research on were okay with what I was doing. And finally, the final bit of the ethical consideration was that you can't purposely make kids mad. So I specifically phrased when I was talking to my participants that they would be playing the game on their own time. I was not forcing them to play the game, it was just as they did it on their own leisure, because I didn't want to purposefully be agitating kids, basically. So my research process was conducted over 5 weeks. The first week, I had them use the method of nothing. I didn't have them use a method because I wanted a control group, essentially, to compare to what the other methods, how that would influence their frustration levels. The second week was a 5-minute break after every match of the game they played. The third week was a 30-minute break after every hour of the game they played. The fourth was just stop playing the game as soon as they felt like they were starting to get frustrated. And the fifth, which was in a different month, was what I like to call it's just a game approach, where I told the participants to just tell themselves, oh, it's just a game, I shouldn't get mad about it, whenever they started feeling worked up about the game, just to calm themselves down. So my quantitative questions, I had them ranked on a scale from 1 to 10 for each of the questions. The first was the frustration level, obviously, to see how frustrated they were. The second was the effectiveness level, to see if the participant felt like the method that they were using that week actually was effective in reducing their frustration. And the third was the enjoyment level, because while a method may be effective at reducing frustration, if it ruins their enjoyment of the game, then there's no point in doing it in the first place. For my qualitative questions, the three that I asked was, what parts of the method you felt were especially effective for you, what parts were ineffective for you, and any additional comments. These were all basically to get specific participant feedback to see if there were any common patterns between the answers, to see if participants all felt the same way about a method, or if only one person felt a certain way about a method compared to others. These are my qualitative answers that I collected. I organized them in a way where I just gave the most common responses. I was expecting there to be a lot of outliers in terms of responses, but there really weren't. All the participants were saying essentially the same thing in their responses most of the time. For the no method week, there's typically no feedback given because there was no method. But the participants did say that they felt like what friend group they were in played a large role in how frustrated they would get. Because if they were in a friend group that was getting mad as they were playing the game, it would cause them to get frustrated while playing the game as well. But if they were playing with a more upbeat group who was just trying to chill while they're playing the game, they wouldn't get as frustrated. Some people also said that they just didn't get very frustrated in the first place, so they felt like they didn't even need a method, so they already scored very low in their frustration levels. For the 5-minute break, people thought the break was too ineffective. It wasn't long enough. They felt like they couldn't detach from the game long enough to do anything else, so they didn't think it was very effective. They also thought that the breaks were too frequent. They didn't like how after a game that they played, after one match of Overwatch or Marvel Rivals that they played, they may have wanted to jump into another because they're having a really fun time, but the 5-minute break just prevents them from doing that. And finally, it was annoying to be left out, because if they were playing in a friend group and the other people in that group weren't taking the 5-minute break after every match, that friend group would continue to play the game, and they felt like they were being left out of some fun that their friends were having. For the 30-minute break, People thought that the time break for this one was much more effective. They thought they could fully detach from the game and decompress and just go do something else for 30 minutes. They thought that the frequency was still a little annoying, especially on weekends where there were longer play sessions, but it wasn't nearly as bad as the 5-minute break. And overall, they just enjoyed this one a lot more than the 5-minute break. For stopping when mad, the people liked how flexible this was around friends because, like I said before, people may become more frustrated if they're around a group of people who is naturally more agitated. And so if they were in that experience, they already weren't enjoying it, so they could just leave the friend group, and they didn't feel like they were missing out on anything because they already weren't having fun in the first place. They also liked how they had much more control over this, so it wasn't so much them needing to stop at a very specific time, but they could take as long as they needed to during the break, or take the breaks as frequently as they felt like they needed to. The one drawback to this was giving them more freedom meant that sometimes they would actually forget to do this, so sometimes they would get frustrated and just forget to do it in the first place, which it was the one drawback of the method. And finally, for the it's just a game method, no one thought that this was effective. A lot of people forgot to use this one very frequently, similar to the other one. This one I was giving them even more control essentially, and because I was basically just telling them to regulate their own thoughts, everyone was forgetting to use this a lot. And people said that the sudden shift in mentality is really difficult, because if you already feel frustrated about something, it's very hard to tell your brain this doesn't matter and I should just calm down about it. It's very difficult to do that, and that was reflected in the responses. So analyzing my qualitative answers overall, the frustration levels varied a lot between participants. A method may have been effective, but it may not have been fun for the participants. I did see that in a few, especially the 5-minute break one. Friends played a very much larger role in the frustration level of participants than I had initially anticipated. The more control that I allowed participants to have, typically the more fun it was for them, but the less disciplined they became, so the less they would actually be using the method. And sudden changes in mentality are difficult, the more freedom you give them. So these are the quantitative answers that I collected, and this is the improvement seen between them. So for the it's just a game method, this was the only week where there was negligible improvement to not using a method at all. Every single other method saw at least some form of improvement. Stopping when mad and the 30-minute break methods scored the highest in terms of effectiveness. However, participants preferred the just stop taking a break as soon as they started to get frustrated method overall. So, what does this all mean? In conclusion, this means that the stopping when mad method was the most effective and enjoyable of the few that I tested. Self-control is difficult, especially for this adolescent group. So giving people more freedom may make them enjoy something more. However, it may make the method more ineffective because participants wouldn't be doing it as much. And finally, friends play a much larger role when you're in terms of your frustration level. So surrounding yourself with people who get less frustrated at a game will help with your frustration level while playing the game and help you enjoy it more. Some implications and limitations of my research. Separation from the game was the most effective that I found of the few that I tested. Some people became less frustrated some people were just naturally less frustrated than others while playing the games, and friends play a large role. Limitations of my research was the amount of methods that I tested, because I only did it over 5 weeks. I'm sure there's many more methods I could have tested. The amount of participants I used was also a very large limiting factor, and this plays much more into the quantitative response that I received because it skewed the averages a lot more, only having 3 participants. And finally, the variety of playtime. I hadn't thought about it, but participants may be playing the game and using a given method more time during one week compared to another. And this may affect how much exposure they had to a certain method, which may have made them enjoy certain methods more than others. For future research, I suggest a larger participant size, especially if they wanted to collect better averages. As opposed to doing more qualitative answers, I think if you're just going for quantitative, more participant size would help the averages be less skewed, so that's what I recommend. I also recommend new methods. There's so many different methods we could be testing, and I only tested a few of them. And also testing methods that aren't just breaks or telling participants to act a certain way, maybe introducing something like a therapist or something like that could help participants more, but I didn't do that during my research. So new methods would definitely, I'd recommend for future research. I'd also recommend different games. It may be different multiplayer games, different games in the same genre that I did, or even different games in different genres. People could analyze how single-player games affect people's frustration level compared to multiplayer games. And finally, I'd recommend being able to control the friend aspect of it, because I hadn't anticipated on the friends playing such a large role on the frustration level that participants experienced. So maybe making a group of participants who didn't interact with friends and then another group who did interact with friends would be more beneficial to making sure that the data was less skewed one way or another depending on the friend groups that they were in. Overall, the no method approach that I use on participants, overall, no method came without criticism. However, the one with the method in which participants just stopped playing as soon as they started getting mad was the most effective that I found overall. But I would just recommend, if you wanted to reduce if you're experiencing the same problem that I did with frustration in video games, I would recommend just surrounding yourself with people who are less naturally frustrated overall and who you just have a better time with, because that seemed to be one of the largest factors playing into the frustration levels of participants. Thank you.
Nice. Okay, question. After you chose your project goal, which information guided your choice of a research method?
I would say the one that affected which research method I chose was likely the one where that was likely the sources I found of the journalists especially giving different recommendations for methods that you could apply to reduce frustration. And this is because I didn't think that I would be able to get a large group of people to all consistently stay on the same schedule and do these different methods, because I really wanted to test to see if the methods that they recommended were effective. But so that's what caused me to choose the case study, was because I wanted to use less participants and then just go more in depth and make sure that all of them were doing the specific methods that I had applied to them. Because I really wanted to see if what journalists were saying was actually true, or if they were just making stuff up to get clicks on their pages.
Okay, the question that I have for you is, what might be the real world implication or even consequences to a local school having access to information or the experiment that you have conducted?
I think this is really useful for parents especially, who may have kids who become frustrated with playing video games, and the parent might scold them, especially because saying stuff like, I know this happens to me a lot at least, is saying, it's just a game, like why are you getting so mad over it? This may help people to see the other perspective, where just because something isn't important to you, it may be important to someone else. And so there are methods to help reduce that frustration, but you shouldn't just be telling someone to stop doing the thing that they enjoy just because it makes them frustrated. And so I think that this just helps people see it from a different perspective, because a lot of the time I think people just see video games as something that people shouldn't be getting worked up over, and that it's just not, and the people who do get worked up over it, they're just like being weird and crazy essentially.
How has your views changed about the nature of your inquiry as you have completed the research process? Are you still interested in this topic?
I am definitely still interested in this topic. I've been interested since the beginning. This is the question that I had from the very beginning, and I have not really deviated from it across all of my research. I want to keep looking into this because I think this is really important, especially because it's just something that I'm really passionate about, because I'm someone who has like these problems with the frustration in video games. And so if I can find a method that is the most effective method for myself at reducing frustration, it only helped me, but it would help my family around me who has to listen to screaming sometimes. And I also think that'd be interesting to find if there were specific methods that worked better for one person over another. So I'm definitely still interested in this research.
Any other questions here?
I have another question. Did you ever consider, as one of the methods, switching to another less anxiety-provoking genre for the breaks? For example, playing Overwatch or the Marvels game for, say, an hour, and then 10 minutes of Animal Crossing.
That was part of my stopping when playing Mad. Stopping as soon as you start to get mad method. I let participants do whatever they want. They didn't have to separate themselves from the computer or whatever console they were playing necessarily. They just had to stop playing that specific game that was making them frustrated. So that's why they liked it so much, was because it really let them do whatever they want. They didn't have to get off the computer. They could just do something that was much more calming to them.
Okay, thank you.